Ladies and mostly gentlemen, today we're going to talk about mounts, a subject we talk a lot on this channel, but more specifically we're going to talk about all the brand new reputation mounts that are coming to the game in the new expansion Battle for Azeroth. So since the beginning of time, Blizzard have always had mounts as a reward for becoming exalted with a specific faction. In Legion, the system was slightly tweaked with the introduction of emissary cash rewards and Paragon reputation mounts, but by the end of the expansion they were back to their old ways of adding mounts as an exalted reward for gold for the Argusian Reach and the Army of the Light, which is the way it should be in my opinion. So in Battle for Azeroth, as you probably know by now, the Horde and the Alliance will have vastly different questing experiences, having 3 zones each to explore and level in. With these 6 zones comes 6 new factions, and with those 6 factions comes mount rewards for each of them. So strap in for a long one as we're going to go over all of these mounts, showcasing the mount, showing the current price on the beta, and where to buy them. Remember, this is all from the current beta, so this could probably all be completely changed and incorrect by the time of release, but we'll see. So let's start off by checking out the Alliance mounts. Now I know a lot of people talk about Horde bias in this expansion, and well, let's take a look at these mounts and see if you feel the same. So the first faction we're looking at is the Proudmoore Admiralty. This will be one of the first factions you bump into in Kulturas, as they're primarily based in the main hub city known as Borealis and the surrounding Tirgar Sound. In-game, their faction description is Masters of the Sea and Commanders of Azeroth's finest navy. The distinguished Proudmoore family has led Kulturas for decades from the seat of power in Borealis. So this faction have 2 mounts for you to purchase once you hit Exalted. The first one is the Reigns of the Pearl Admiralty Stallion, which looks like this. Using the new high-res hench horse model, nothing breathtaking about this mount at all, just a plain white horse. The new model does look great, but I have a funny feeling that all of the horses you're going to see in this video might be placeholder, because judging by the collector's edition mount, they could do a lot with a horse. Or I might be wrong and we're just getting a plain white horse as a reward. The next mount is a flying mount known as the Reigns of the Proudmoore Sea Scout. This is a green and white recolor of the HD Griffin mounts we first saw in Mr. Pandaria. It's a great looking model, and honestly it's about time they added more of these to the game. These 2 mounts will be sold by Provision of Frey in Borealis for 5,000 gold each. They also use these griffins for flight paths around Kulturas. Next up is a faction known as Storm's Wake. They're based in the green and luscious zone of Stormsong Valley, which is personally by far my favourite zone for the Alliance. It just makes me happy. So their in-game faction description is home to farmers, craftsmen, soldiers, and the mysterious Tide Sages. The Storm's Wake seek to reclaim Stormsong Valley to affirm their place in Kulturas. So much like the previous rep, this faction also have 2 mounts, and they're going to be a ground and a flying mount. Take a guess what they are. Don't worry, I'll wait. Done guessing? Well, this is one of them. It is called the Reigns of the Stormwake's Dapple Grey. This is once again one of those HD horse mounts, but this one features a blue ribbon, so I'm unsure if it is a placeholder, but I'm hoping they do have more to add to this one, although it's not as bad as a plain unarmoured horse. Their second mount is called the Reigns of the Stormsong Coast Watcher. Look familiar? That's because it's also a recolor of the Miss High-Red's Griffin, but this recolor is in white and blue to represent the faction's colours. Overall it's a slight improvement from the last faction, but it's really not doing for me. I guess if anything, I could give them some credit for matching the colours of the Griffin's feathers to the colour of the horse. I guess that's pretty cool, although we're not going to be flying in Kulturas for a while yet. These 2 mounts will be sold for 5,000 gold from a vendor which I couldn't find, but it'll probably be in Stormsong Valley somewhere. And finally for the Alliance, we have a faction called the Order of the Embers, and they are based out of the spooky zone known as Drusvar. Their in-game faction description is an ancient Kultiran order resurrected to battle the threat of witchcraft. The Order of the Embers fights with knowledge guiding their blades. Exactly like the previous 2 factions, this faction has 2 mounts, and yep, you guessed it, one's flying and one's ground. So the ground mount is called the Reigns of the Waycrest Smoky Black Charger, and it looks like this. Yep, another horse. Much like the Proudmoore horse, I have a feeling this mount will be some sort of a placeholder for a much cooler looking horse in the future, because this mount is literally just a saddled version of the Gilnean horse, which is also receiving an upgrade in Battle for Azeroth. Their flying mount is once again a high-res griffin, known as the Reigns of the Dusky Waycrest Griffin. This one is a much darker shade than the previous, and I actually think it looks great. Even though it's the 3rd recolor we've seen on this list, but it's definitely the best we've seen so far. It really captures the spooky and mysterious nature of Drusvar. These will also be sold by a vendor in Drusvar for 5,000 gold each. So that's currently all the reputation mounts for the Alliance right now. Pretty shit, right? Well, let's move on to the Horde, and you can really see how unfair this expansion really is. So first up, let's check one of the main factions of the expansion for the Horde, and the one that you bump into first. They're primarily based in Zuldazar, and specifically the main Horde hub city, known as Dazara Law. Their in-game faction description is the oldest empire on Azeroth. The Zandalari are powerful trolls who bargain with fearsome Loa, and whose navy is unmatched on the Great Sea. This faction actually blesses you with 4 mounts to purchase, which are all different colours of Pterodax, so the 4 you can buy are the Reigns of the Armoured Orange Pterodax, the Reigns of the Armored Ebony Pterodax, the Reigns of the Armored Albino Pterodax, and the Reigns of the Armored Cobalt Pterodax. All of these mounts look great, and you can actually see them in person around Dazara lore. And much like the Alliance, they use these mounts for flypast throughout Zandalar. At first glance, I actually thought this mount was a recolor of the Throne of Thunder achievement mount, but it turns out it's actually very different and it's a brand new model, using a similar rigging though. I love the minor details on this mount as well, the Zandalari troll icon on the chest of it, and the rustic ladder made of bones heading up to the saddle on this mount. It really feels like they've just captured these creatures out of the dungeon and made them into mounts. These mounts will also be on sale for 5,000 gold each from Nathul Hakata, in Zandalar. Overall, the 4 colours look incredible, and Blizzard have done a really great job on these mounts. I really hope the Alliance do get a chance to obtain one of these one day, even if it's a rare drop from a raid or something. They just look so awesome. So next up is the Volden Eye, also known as the Volpura faction, and they're based out of the desert zone of Vol'dun, which is probably my second favourite zone of the expansion. It's got some great questing and the environment looks amazing. So the in-game faction description for this faction is: comprised of exiles and scavengers, the Volden Eye use their knowledge of the sands to thrive where others would wither and die. So these Volpura have one mount available to you, and it is called the Reigns of the Alabaster Hyena, and it looks like this. So ever since the first glimpse of the hyena mounts, everyone has just wondered how you can obtain them, and unfortunately for the Alliance, this is an exclusive Horde mount for now. This mount looks awesome, and much like the Pterodax, the details when you get up close to it are just amazing. With a saddle made of bones and cloth, it's just really cool. Along with a leather collar and metal cuffs on the ankles, it really does look mean. This isn't actually the only colour for the mount in the game files, so don't lose hope, Alliance players, because hopefully they won't go to waste. This model's animations are exactly the same as the in-game wolves, which is actually a skeleton they've used for a few mounts in this expansion so far, such as the Dark Iron Racial mount. This mount will also be available again for 5,000 gold, probably from some Volpura in Vol'dun. And finally, we're going to look at the faction known as Talanji's Expedition. They're primarily based out of Nazmir in Zandalar. Their in-game faction description is: Princess Talanji and her allies fight to protect Zandalar from an onslaught of blood trolls. They have one mount available at Exalted, and it is called the Reigns of the Expedition Bloodswarmer, and it looks like this. Now, I haven't personally done the Nazmir quests, but after speaking to some guys at the Discord, this is a creature used by the Blood Trolls of Nazmir, who are hostile to the Horde and the Alliance, which is actually a nice touch. I'm actually not sure whether or not this is a flying mount or not. It does have flying animations, but I'm swaying more towards it being a ground mount. That being said, the mount special animation even has the mount hovering. So what do you guys think? But I've got to admit, the mount does look so awesome and unique. And the tiny details on this mount really bring it to life, and I love it. If you look at the top of the mount, it actually has tiny skulls on it, and on the sides of it, it has these small jars of blood, along with the blood stains on the spikes on the top. It's just so gruesome. To my knowledge, this is a brand new model and rigging, but I'm probably wrong, so please correct me if it has been used before. There are many other colours for this mount in the game files, and as an Alliance main, I really hope they do end up in our hands. Although it is nice having different mounts for different factions, it's sort of a throwback to vanilla, when the craziest thing as an Alliance player you'd ever see is an Alliance player on a skeletal warhorse. Overall, a really cool looking mount, and obviously this will be sold for 5,000 gold in Nazmir somewhere. That's pretty much all I've got for the current faction reward mounts. If you're keeping count, the amount of mounts for each faction is sitting at 6 each, but the amount per faction does vary with the Horde. So let's say in the best case scenario, where the Talanji Expedition mount is a ground mount, there are still only 2 ground mounts for the Horde and 4 flying mounts, and for the Alliance there are 3 ground and 3 flying. There are also 2 more reputations for each faction, which are linked with the War Campaign. If you didn't know what the War Campaign is, it's the name of the questing on the opposite island, so the Alliance in Zandalar and the Horde in Kul Tiras. These will more than likely have some sort of mount rewards linked to them, as currently there are other rewards, such as tabards and cloaks. You also have the Champions of Azeroth faction, which I think is linked to the Heart of Azeroth. You also have the Tortolan, which is a neutral faction for both sides. So those 2 factions could potentially bring some new mounts for players. There are also still quite a few mounts which have been data mined but don't have a specific way of obtaining them, such as the Brontosaurus mount, but with the beta heating up with patches every week, we'll know in due time how we'll be able to attain all of these mounts. So obviously now you've seen all the mounts, let me know down in the comment section what you think of all these mounts and what's your favourite. And do you think there is a Horde bias with these mounts? And do you also think that the Alliance mounts could potentially be placeholder for much cooler horses in the future? I'd love to know what you guys think. So before I go, I'd like to give a massive shout out to amazing patrons and YouTube sponsors. You guys are awesome. And if you'd like to support the channel in that way, links are down below. So leave a like on this video if you liked it, guys, and subscribe if you haven't. I also have a partner Discord channel with over 3,000 members. Link is down below. And with that, I'll see you next time.